Hi, my name's Andy, and my love story goes against any expectations I might have had for my first ever relationship. That's a common saying, right? Well, in my case, it was really different because I ended up calling the cops on my own girlfriend for something that wasn't her fault. Hear me out. I'll explain from the beginning. When I was in high school, I finally had a chance to talk to the girl I'd been pining for since kindergarten. Leah was everything I'm not. She was pretty, popular, everyone wanted to be her friend. And I was just that average guy that keeps a low profile. But somehow, she noticed me. We were lab partners, and we got along really well. Eventually, we were hanging out after school almost every afternoon. However, things didn't go that smooth afterwards. You see, I didn't exactly have any money, and as our relationship progressed, I found myself feeling more and more anxious every day. I knew Leah loved gifts and all, but I couldn't do that for her. So instead of fancy restaurants for dates, we went to fast food restaurants. Instead of nights out at the movies, we were watching TV shows on my couch. So, I always wondered how long she was going to stick around with me. When junior prom came around, I was in a panic. I couldn't afford a suit, so I had to wear nice pants and a hand-me-down jacket that was 3 sizes too big. I couldn't even afford a corsage for Leah, so I went out and picked some wildflowers to put in a wire. But when Leah arrived and saw my DIY corsage, she loved it. She then handed over a brand new suit. I think my jaw actually hit the floor. The suit had the $400 tag still on it. I told Leah I couldn't accept it, but she insisted. As we danced at prom, I couldn't help but wonder, where had Leah got the money from? As the months went on, anything I wanted or needed, Leah would provide for me. And by anything, I mean anything. From school books to a brand new phone. My initial reaction was to be excited and grateful, but I knew something was not right. What was she doing to earn all this money? Later on, things escalated even further. Leah started showing up in super expensive clothes, so much so that it was getting ridiculous. And whenever I asked her about it, she said that her dad or rich grandma had given her the money. Leah didn't have a rich grandma, nor a father that could afford to spend like that. The worrying had become so overwhelming that I decided to do something about it. I'm not exactly proud of what I did. One day, when Leah wasn't home, I climbed through her bedroom window. I looked through her drawers, under her bed, and at first, everything looked normal. But then I opened the closet. A flood of clothing and electronics tumbled out like an avalanche. They all had price tags on them. I sat in the mound of clothing, utterly dumbfounded. And that's when Leah opened the door. She stuttered, horrified to see me sitting there. I didn't justify why I was there. Instead, I demanded to know what was happening. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she confessed her secret. She was addicted to shoplifting. Leah ran into my arms as she started crying even more. This was wrong, very wrong. But she was my girlfriend. And I had to help her. You'd think that after her confession, things would have started to make sense. But not really, because I soon found out that she was lying to cover up something even worse. At first, I believed her. I promised that I would get her the help she needed, and that then she would never steal again. She seemed to agree with everything I said, but something still felt wrong. It seemed like Leah was always on edge, always running on not enough sleep. I worried at first if her job in the nursing home was becoming too much, until I saw her unexpectedly at the grocery store. She didn't see me in the parking lot. I watched her for a bit, thinking about how lucky I was to have her. But that's when I saw what was in her trunk. Mounds and mounds of expensive items with the tags still on them. My sweet moment of gratitude crashed and burned. Leah was stealing again. I felt so angry. Every bit of trust I had in her disintegrated at that moment. I wanted to storm over, to yell at her. But I knew better. Calling her out on her actions wasn't going to do any good. I had to catch her in the act. I had to make it real. So I made a hard decision. For a few nights, I tried to make plans to hang out with her and she made excuses. It seemed like every night it was a cousin's birthday or a night out with friends, but her actions told a whole different story. I expected her to be going to stores at night, but she always ended up at the nursing home she volunteered at. The worst part? She would park down the street and then climb in a window. If you have to climb in a window to do anything, that's a dead giveaway that you probably shouldn't be doing whatever it is you're doing. I sat outside, completely lost, racking my brain to try and figure out what the heck was going on. I knew she didn't work the night shift, so what on earth was she doing there? Obviously, her boss and coworkers wouldn't approve of whatever it was. Each night I'd watch as she walked out, smiling and holding a handful of cash. It had to be hundreds of dollars. My mind was going 1,000,000 miles an hour. How was she getting money like that from a nursing home? Was she selling stolen goods to the elderly people there? Was she buying and selling medication to people in there? Whatever she was doing, I had to put a stop to it. Her 18th birthday was just around the corner, and the very real possibility that she could actually go to jail and be charged as an adult for stealing was only a few weeks away. I had to talk to her. I had to give her one more chance. I told Leah I saw her in the nursing home, and she went really quiet. We talked about how she was 18 soon, and she told me she was embarrassed. She told me she would try to stop, and honestly, it didn't make me feel any better. I had heard her say this for what felt like years. But unfortunately, things only started to get worse. Leah began to look absolutely exhausted. She barely texted me. She barely called. I went to the nursing home a few nights to look for her, and sure enough, one rainy night, I found her there. I couldn't sit outside and watch anymore. I stormed out of my car, slammed the door, and followed her usual path and through the window. To say the inside of the building was terrifying is an understatement. Everything was pitch black. I tiptoed forward, grasping the wall to try and guide myself. A sliver of light from a nearby room finally came into view. Inside there were strange whispers and laughing. What had Leah gotten into? It was Leah's 18th birthday in 3 days. What was going to happen if she got caught in 4 days? In 5? In 6? She would go to jail. She would get a record. Her life would be over. I had tried therapy. I tried to get her help. She went back to stealing every single time. Maybe getting caught would be the best thing for her. What if that was the only way she would stop? I dialed 911 into my phone, but I couldn't hit call yet. I had to see behind the door. I had to confirm my worst fears. I summoned up all my courage. I sucked in a deep breath, prepared for anything. Threw open the door, and suddenly realized I hadn't actually been prepared for anything. Leah was sat with a bunch of elderly people, and she was sitting in the front. It looked like she was in charge of a bingo game. Leah saw me and immediately turned bright red. She was playing bingo? I asked her what the heck was going on, and she looked near tears. She told me she had started playing with the patients when she began working here. They seemed lonely, and it had been a fun little hobby at first, but then she found a way to make money off it. They played for money, and she made sure she won each time. And if not, she got someone to win for her and they split the money. She was embarrassed. She told me her cool friends made fun of her for even volunteering here. If they found out that she was actually friends with them and playing bingo with them, she would never hear the end of it. When I came into the room and found her, she just went along with it. She had gotten so caught up in her life about being a thief that she couldn't even change her story now. I don't know if I should have been mad, but I wasn't. I laughed. She had lied, and that was horrible. But I had almost just called the cops on my girlfriend for playing bingo with elderly people. We had a lot of discussions after that, about our relationship, about how I value her for the cool and not so cool things she does. But she's not embarrassed anymore about not having a lot of money. Have you ever been in a similar situation like this before, where you had to make a difficult decision to help someone you care about?
Hi, I'm Kelly, and the reason I'm still alive today is because of my mother. After you hear my story too, you might think I don't deserve the life my mother gave me. Well, sometimes I think so too. It all began since I was a little child. I was born with kidney problems, and I always had to go to painful treatments just to stay alive. With time, life was getting harder, and I can't tell you how often I just wanted to give up. Despite my struggle, I wanted to enjoy the little things in life like any teenager, especially that I didn't know how much time I have left. I was determined to use every second. You see, my parents didn't understand that, especially my mother. I had to argue with her before I could do anything. She was always afraid something bad happens to me because of my malfunctioning kidneys. I wasn't allowed to go on long trips with friends, no camping, no parties, and no sleepovers. Basically, I was sick, and my parents made my life even more unbearable. With time, the relationship with my mother became very complicated. I would get 20 calls from her a day, asking me where I'm at, how I was feeling, and if I took my medicine. Most of these phone calls would end up with a heated argument. I felt like a prisoner that is being watched, and all I wanted was to be alone. I was 17 at the time, and having your mother on the phone all the time was pretty embarrassing, to say the least. You might think that my mother was trying to protect me, but the truth was, my mother only acted that way out of guilt. While I was waiting for a kidney donor, I always knew that there's a high chance that my own mom would be the perfect match. Even though many of the people I know got tested to see if they were qualified, my own mother never did. It was a touchy subject. I mean, you can't just ask people to give you their kidney, but I did try to bring up the subject multiple times when I was with her. However, my mother always brushed it off and never really gave me a clear answer. Because of that, my mom had no right to tell me what to do or act as if she cared. For all I knew, she just wanted to ease her feelings of guilt. Or that's what I thought. One day, there was a house party that I was dying to go to. I knew that my mother would never approve, and there was no way I could miss it. So I planned to go without telling her. After school, I told her I'm staying over at my friend's house to work on a project, and my plan was to stay there and go to the party after. And that's exactly what happened. I wasn't going to let my mother ruin my mood, so I sent her a text saying that my phone was about to die and that I'll be home late. Samantha and I went together, and the party was booming. There were music, dancing, and even alcohol. Most importantly, Jacob was there, the boy I had a crush on for ages. When I saw him, I went up to him to say hi. He looked so handsome. He welcomed me with a smile and gave me a hug. Jacob then asked if he could get me something to drink. Because of my condition, I wasn't allowed to drink alcohol, but I couldn't really say no to Jacob. He got me a bottle of beer, which I kinda just held in my hand and took really small sips. I was enjoying the party so much that I forgot about the time. I knew my mother would be upset, but at that point, I didn't really care. Standing there with Jacob at that moment was the most fun I had since a long time. I could tell that he liked me the way I did. We were flirting, and there was definitely an attraction between us. I knew Jacob wanted to kiss me, and I was waiting for it. We were close to one another, and with every second that passed, I felt him getting closer and closer as he was staring into my eyes. Eventually, I knew it was time. I closed my eyes and I waited for the kiss, but it never came. I opened my eyes and saw Jacob looking in the other direction. He then turned to me and asked, "Is that your mother?" My jaw dropped. She was there, standing behind Jacob. When she came closer, my mother could see that I was holding a beer, which made her go crazy. She started screaming at me in front of all my friends. I could not believe what was happening. She said that she kept calling my friends until one of them told her I was here. She grabbed my hand and started walking towards the door. I had enough. I stopped, pulled my hand back, and told her she can go home alone. My mom seemed to understand that she was acting crazy, so she tried to trick me by asking me nicely to go home with her. But there was no way. I was not going to let her control me anymore, and she was ruining my chances I have with Jacob. I looked at her and said with a loud voice, "If you're so worried about my health, why don't you just donate a kidney to your dying daughter?" My mom froze. She wanted to say something but couldn't. I told her if she's not willing to help me, then she should leave me to enjoy whatever I have left of life at least. My mom looked as if she was going to cry, and she just responded with, "Okay." As I saw her leaving, I couldn't hold my tears. I knew that I had hurt her feelings. Jacob came up to me and asked me if I was okay. Well, I wasn't. I was feeling horrible. I asked him if he could bring me a drink, and this time I took a larger sip. I was starting to feel better, or so I thought. The next morning, I woke up in a bed that wasn't mine. I looked around. Everything was blurry. I was in so much pain. I felt a hand holding mine, and I heard my mother's voice. "Everything will be okay," she said. "You need an urgent kidney transplant, and the doctors found a donor." I don't remember much from when on, but when I woke up after that, I was out of surgery with a new kidney. It took me a while before I understood what was going on. I was under the influence of drugs, and I kept falling asleep. I'm not sure how much time passed, but when I regained my consciousness, my dad told me that my mom was the kidney donor. I was a bit confused, but also thankful. This was the moment I have been waiting for my whole life, and all I wanted to do was to hug my mom and thank her. I asked my dad how she was doing. but my father was silent. He said that I needed to rest and everything will be okay. My heart started beating fast. I knew something was wrong with my mother. I asked my dad again how she was, and I could see that he was trying to hold back his tears. I immediately started to cry, and I kept repeating my question. Eventually, my father told me that my mother had passed away. I was quiet for a few moments. It can't be. How could she die? She was just with us. My father then explained that my mother knew she was an eligible donor from the beginning, but the problem was that the doctors told her that her body might not be strong enough, and she could risk her life. She then decided to wait for another donor, but when things seemed hopeless, she chose to give me her kidney without my knowledge. She was sure that if I knew it would risk her life, I wouldn't accept it. It was her choice, my father said. She couldn't see you suffer like that any longer. I wasn't ready to hear that answer. I couldn't believe how selfish I was. I wished at that moment to go back and undo everything. I didn't want my mother's kidney. I wanted my mother. Years passed. Until this day, the guilt I feel is unbearable. If you're watching this, please make sure you make your mother feel appreciated as long as you have the chance to do so.